was worldwide. Powerful cars were flown to England from Australian factories and in our new surroundings were made ready for the event.
And David McCann.
A London to Sydney marathon instinct, and bookmaking firms quoted odds to those who thought they could pick a likely winner. Contestants came from 17 countries and included most of the world's best rallyists. Men like Big Bengt Soderstrom, the benign Swede who with Gunnar Palm formed one of the world's top combinations. Fresh from victory in the RAC Rally was Finland's Simo Lampinen, a rapid man on rough going, while Ken Chambers and Eric Jackson were long-distance specialists. Australian rallyman Bob Forsyth was a veteran and former Australian model Jenny Britton, a novice, travelling with her English journalist husband, Nick Britton. In a masculine sport, Rosemary Smith stood out, in more ways than one, while racing driver Jenny Tudor Owen was one of the 12 women drivers who would spend the next 3.5 weeks travelling through 11 countries to Sydney. The rules were simple. Cars could be no more than 6 feet high, so they could fit on the ship taking them from Bombay to Fremantle. Engines could not be changed, nor could bodies, and they were marked with a special paint. That was all. Any two-wheel drive car was eligible, and 98 finally prepared cars were at London's Crystal Palace to face the starter. The Royal Automobile Club was organising the marathon with sponsorship from the London Daily Express and the Sydney Daily Telegraph. First prize alone was £10,000 sterling, but that wasn't the only attraction. There were many people competing because they believed it could be an instrument of adventure.
This glorious vehicle, what seems to be the problem?
I think fitting the numbers on. I don't think there's anything else, just we haven't got quite enough room to fit them on the sides. We don't have doors, you see.
Yes, there's this one here.
A bit more stuff to fall off.
Most of the big major factories, of course, have backup vehicles and aeroplanes throughout the world, and they're pretty ripe for spare parts. How do you feel about this with your car?
Well, I just don't think this is the right spirit of the thing. Fine, I think the fact that we're just going on our own, we've got what spare parts we have, we've got to carry. We don't obviously compete with the main teams or anything else.
No matter what your view on the marathon, this was the moment that counted, the start. Bill Bengry had drawn number 1, 10,000 miles to go, £10,000 and more at stake. 57 entries were from Britain, 18 from Australia. This was the first of the Down Under contingent, Harry Firth. Appropriate that he should lead, for Harry was the reigning Australian rally champion. Pretty Girls flanked her favourite, Roger Clark. He'd been in tremendous form, and in a twin-cam Lotus Cortina was British Ford's #1 hope. Close behind him was one of his great rivals in a Works British Leyland Austin 1800, former Monte Carlo rally winner, Paddy Hopkirk. John Saladin, in the sole American entry, was to achieve a rare distinction. He was to be the only competitor to drive right through a Turkish house, walls and all, and keep going. Rano Altonen wasn't on the spot to film that incident, but maybe the former European rally champion was able to get a movie sequence of actor and motorsport enthusiast Terry Thomas with the car he had sponsored for the event. Well, he found somewhere to put on the sign. Keith's 1930 Bentley, 3 tons of machinery from the pre-air-conditioned age. The old Bentley was giving 38 years' start to some of the other machinery, but would outlast a few of them, including this fuel-injected Lotus Cortina of Peter Harper. Much faded, the car was destined to retire early on with water pump failure. The route led to Dover, and police estimated that more than 1 million people lined the road to wish the crews well for their long journey. A special ferry had been chartered 98 cars across the channel. 2 concepts in performance, Sun 11 and David Mackay's Holden Monaro. The channel was also the marathon men's first taste of the money-changing ritual, which was to mark every border crossing. 3 Japanese were in a British Vauxhall, and Australian Max Stahl was in an English-entered German Mercedes-Benz. Confused? Everyone tried to rest for the coming all-night drive across France. The ferry was on time, so no one was faced with a points loss at the Calais control. Being a rally rather than a race, cars were to be given set times to reach each of the control points along the way. Every minute late would cost 1 point. Only 3 vehicles were carrying 4 in the crew. This was one, a Valiant station wagon, which left the control just ahead of Clyde Hodgson's survival car, an Australian design study in vehicle safety features. 4 Russian Moskviches were in, strong as tanks and led by Tank Corps Commander Alexander Epatenko. Fog caused some problems on the way to Paris, but Works Falcon GT driver Ian Vaughan had no worries. The Australian combination most favoured in pre-event betting was the Evan Green, Gelignite Jack Murray and George Shepherd team. They were in a factory 1800. Service crews were out already and having a few anxious glances at Andrew Cowan's Hunter. The tricolour treatment for Jerry Lister and Andre Walensky driving a Volvo for the Amoco Australia team. The next stage, Paris to Turin, was 480 miles, a journey that took the field through France to the Alps. So early in the event, trouble was about to strike another top driver. Bengt Soderstrom, the big Swede, was to strip his timing gear before Turin. He was to buy a new part from a private, but it was going to cost him £100 to persuade the owner to part with it. Apparently, prices go up when the marathon goes by. David. So was this Volvo, with the Australian Ripco engine conversion crewed by a top pair in Max Winkles and John Kieran. Winkles was the '68 New South Wales Rally champion. Kieran won the international. For more than 7 miles, the longest of its kind in the world, bores under Mont Blanc. And at the other end lies Italy. A magnificent autostrada ran right across the north of Italy, through Turin and on towards Yugoslavia. Cars were able to maintain high cruising speeds. Even time to shave on the move. With no road problems, drivers could relax, and the first 1,000 miles of the marathon passed easily. Numbers had to be covered, by the way, to comply with the Italian law. Belgrade, crews were as much as 8 or 9 hours ahead of time. Early arrivals snatched some rest, while Yugoslavs milled round their parked cars. The 3 girls of the Daily Telegraph team bobbed up on time, although they'd lost a few points, through getting lost in the Paris fog in their car, the Galloping Tortoise. Telegraph Chief David McNichol was proud of his girls. He sent them to bed while he did the housework. One other car was a little beyond washing.
The British Embassy at Belgrade, Yugoslavia, the driver of car number 67. This car has been involved in an accident. This is its driver, Mr. Cliff Woodley.
We were going along in, not exactly a convoy, but there may have been 20 cars in all the rally cars that were going, and the tyre of mine went off with a terrific explosion and a bang. I was shot in against the side of the road, hit a rock, glanced back into the road again, in the lane of all the oncoming traffic. Realizing that I had to pull over quick, I shot over back to my own side quick, and with the same went in over the bank, and the whole car rode over down the bank, and we ended up in a big puddle of water and mud at the bottom of the ditch in the side of the road.
Things were just a little crowded at the control. Cars were required to drive down a narrow street, which was jammed with onlookers, and then do a U-turn and drive back the other way. The result was that some drivers who had had hours to spare back at the car park made the control with only minutes to go. Nerves were becoming ragged. One who was glad to reach the control on time was Italian racing driver Giancarlo Baghetti in the rapid Lancia. With their new and expensive timing gear fitted, Palm and Soderstrom arrived on schedule, but it had to cover 730 miles in 9 hours to do it. People all the time. Or maybe it was some sort of farewell. But the rally was moving on to Istanbul, 15.5 hours traveling time to the east. Curtain was tucked well out of sight at the Bulgarian border. Zazada's Porsche resembled a mobile cage with an enveloping kangaroo guard that had been designed by engineers who measured a roo at a German zoo. The new V6 Taunus of Stapolari and Lampinen was being watched with interest, as was Jenny Britton, but for different reasons. She and husband Nick were running a Works Lotus Cortina which had lost no points at this stage, but was heading for a rendezvous with a straying horse. Istanbul was reached before dawn, and some of the competitors snatched 40 winks on a hotel floor. This was one of those times when a girl wished she'd never heard of the London-Sydney Marathon. The next stage to Sivas in central Turkey was on good roads, but a ferry had to be caught to cross the Bosphorus, and Luciette Pointet, Rosemary Smith's co-driver, was wasting no time. The girls didn't want to miss the boat. Rex Lund's Falcon was about to retire with a broken gearbox, and at the tail of the field, 99, the British Army Lancers Land Rover moved off in two-wheel drive. The ferry across the Bosphorus, and ahead lay Asia. Nearly 2,000 miles had been covered so far. Only those with real trouble had lost points. Up till now, it had been a tour. Soon, it would change. All crews had been warned to beware of Turkish truck drivers. The Valiant wagon was about to demonstrate the value of that warning. 5 miles up the road, it was to have its side torn out in a collision with a truck. On the Anatolian plateau, Soderstrom and Palm were halted once more. This time, no private owner would be coming to their aid. Tony Fall's crew heard the news. The Swedish stars were out with a burnt piston. Harper out, Soderstrom out, Britain tangled with a horse. British Ford's hopes were now largely in the hands of one crew, Car 48, the Swede Ove Anderson and the Briton Roger Clark, two of the world's greatest drivers together in the one car. Just ahead lay Sivas and the start of the first really difficult section, an impossible time through mountainous country. In such an atmosphere, it was natural to try and save seconds. Two who were to have trouble on the next section were a crew from the Royal Navy who became wedged against the rails of a slippery bridge, and more serious, this Ventura, which was to fall from a jack and trap a crew member, fracturing his skull. Incredibly, he was able to continue. Sivas that night was a frantic service point, with tyres the main concern. The marathon was about to move on to unsurfaced mountain roads, And with snow reported in the hills, the right choice of rubber was critically important. Cesada, Poland's leading driver, knew the importance of correct tyre pressures, especially for a rear-engine car with the power of a works Porsche. The next control was 175 miles away, and the average set was more than a mile a minute. Everyone became a little excited. Roy Fiddler gave John Sprinzel the go sign, and the old Bentley moved on to take its turn. Sadly, the road was not to its liking, collapsing beneath the massive weight and dumping the old Warrior on its side at the bottom of an embankment. The Sivas-Erzincan section spread-eagled the field. Roger Clark led from a pair of Taunuses, a Citroen, a bunch of Austin 1800s, some Falcons, and a solitary Hillman Hunter. Into Tehran, the German Taunus V6s had shown that they could go rapidly and were sure to prove a threat to some of the better-known models. Here at the Persian capital, crews were hours early, and the leading Australian pair, Doug Rutherford and Bruce Hodgson, caught up on their sleep as they waited for the nights and booking-in time. One of the German cars needed new front suspension struts, and the Tehran control generally was a busy place. Only one unsurfaced section so far, and already so much work. People were beginning to wonder, what would it be like when they got to Australia? The four girls in the Volvo cut their arrival a little fine and missed getting on the telly like some of the men, but were in time to see Harry Firth leaving for the longest individual run of the whole marathon. The journey into Afghanistan, almost 1,500 miles, a border crossing, and an average speed that would frighten a Sunday motorist off the road for life. Andrew Cowan was well placed, but was 15 points behind the leader, Roger Clark. The bustling Briton was just 6 minutes down. Phenomenally fast. But could he last? That was what people were asking as the field neared the Afghan border. Just like Australia. Ken Tubman and Jack Forrest in their Volvo led Dr. Alex Gorshanen in his Mercedes and 4 times Australian Grand Prix winner Doug Whiteford in the big Holden Monaro V8. Cowan's Hunter entered Afghanistan territory. The crew was highly respected by the European pros, and the car was being backed up by an RAF team, whose identical vehicle could be used for spare parts if the number 1 boys got into strife. Into no man's land drove Paddy Hopkirk for his crew to check their papers at a special border post. All along the way, governments had streamlined passport procedures to make things as simple as possible for the marathon runners. The brief stop was appreciated by David Mackay, whose Holden had been flying and was setting best time for the long section. If you want to win rallies, you should provide the best possible service. With that thought in mind, Ford had an aircraft at Herat in western Afghanistan, where service stations are noted for fiddling with camels, not camshafts. While the mechanics worked, Roger Clark relaxed in the plane with Ove Anderson, a thoroughly civilized way to go rallying. Afghanistan had one sealed highway running right across the country. The king decided to treat the marathon contestants as honored guests of his land, so he closed his only highway to all other traffic for 2 days. And just to make sure no one was tempted to disobey, he closed all petrol pumps 2 days before that. Kabul, the capital, was the only scheduled rest stop on the way to Bombay. But on the next stage, along the old camel route to India, was to be one of the rally's deciding sections, the Nataban Pass. Climbing mountains that rise to 14,000 feet, it had an impossible average speed of 45 miles per hour. Dawn, and the end of the Nataban. Car 31, Evan Green, 8 minutes down, fastest time so far, but times could improve with daylight. David Mackay had Hopkirk chasing him. Paddy lost only 5, best time of the day. Cesada's Porsche had a flat tire and just beat it into the control. Andrew Cowan, 6 minutes. There was the proof. The Hunter was going to be a real threat. Truly, they are crazy. At the Khyber Pass, gateway to Pakistan, Harry Firth had a moment to collect his thoughts. He dropped 9 minutes on the ladder band, was 7th outright, and was the leading Australian by 1 point. The ladder band had shuffled the field. Roger Clark in the Lotus Cortina now led from Lampinen in the Taunus, the Yankee in the Citroën, Hopkirk, and then Alternan, each in 1800s, Cowan in the Hunter, Firth in the Falcon, Green and Jack Murray in another 1800, Jackson's Cortina, and Holden in a Volvo. They were the top 10, but Clark was a clear leader.
In the Khyber Pass, we find a couple of musical Australians. It's Jack Murray and Evan Green. Where did you get this from?
Was it the King of Iran?
No, it was the border down
Oh, the
here
border,
at,
wrong country, I'm sorry.
What's been your impression so far, Evan?
It's been a good run, much as we'd expected. As far as run performance, we were rather having to lie within the first dozen or so, and I think we're now coming 8th or somewhere on there. So
Jack, what about the car? How's it performed all the way through?
Perfectly. We haven't had any major repairs on it and no mechanical trouble whatsoever.
What about
we had
tyres?
one puncture.
How's the company inside the car with George and Evan? Are you looking after them?
Well, it's all right when you open the windows, but you wind them up, and after being in there, say, for 6 or 7 days, Evan lifted his arm up and we got a blue flame from underneath. But apart from that, it's quite okay.
There are no tempos at this stage. Everyone's quite happy with it.
No, it's been fabulous, and the reception in the countries have been mighty.
Lucien Bianchi had been very fast, and the Dutch driver, Robbie Slottermacher, very forceful in his little Dutch DAF. The only sound echoing through the hills was the snarl of sporting exhausts. But not so many years ago, it would have been the bark of long-muzzled rifles. The fortress is a reminder that the Khyber Pass runs through one of the world's most turbulent regions. Through West Pakistan and then India, competitors were given priority. Other traffic was moved out of the way. But in India, with unpredictable crowds, there was always an element of risk. Bob Holden's Volvo was running 10th. Barry Ferguson's Monaro was following him on the run to Delhi. After the mountains, it was a relaxing drive, and then disaster. An army truck hit the Volvo head-on. The truck swerved to miss spectators and plowed into the car. Both Holden and Laurie Graham, who was driving, were taken to hospital with cut faces. But look how far that army truck rebounded. Police said there were 3.5 million spectators in Delhi. They seemed crazy with excitement. Paddy Hopkirk slept on the way in, but no one could stay asleep with such a crowd. This, by the way, was the official enclosure. The big crowd was outside. Leading the field among the private entrants was the Mercedes of Innes Ireland, Mike Taylor and Andrew Hedges, 3 racing drivers who had banded together to have a go at their first rally. They were having a marvelous time. On the way out, the crowds were adjusted to suit narrower cars, and Doug Whiteford's Monaro caused a bit of a squeeze. Next morning, on its way south to Bombay, the all-girls station wagon received some roadside service. Elsie Gadd's girls were carrying a lot of luggage, and the rear shock absorber mountings needed attention. If the highway through Afghanistan had been empty, the one to Bombay, final control on the long overland journey, made up for it. crowds were like this for hundreds of miles. There were millions of people. All were excited. Some were nearly suicidal. Million people lived in Bombay. Most were out to see the cars arrive at the end of the 7,000-mile journey from London. Fast cars arrived early and moved to the wharves, where imported parts were kept under bond. There, servicing could be carried out. In sixth place was the Scottish driver Andrew Cowan, having his Hunter's armoury resharpened for the final dash across Australia. Paddy Hopkirk had no problems, well, nothing mechanical. But teammate Tony Fall had lost 5 hours when an upper suspension arm had cracked back in Persia.
Done a third of what they got to do in Australia.
Harry, what have you got to do to your car, number 2, that's in such a very good position at this stage?
What have we got to do to it? Nothing.
It's ready to go back on the road?
Yeah.
Well, it's very good. Others seem to have
new brake pads, new Dunlops, tighten the fan belt, give it a grease and change the oil.
And you'll be back to park firmly, have a rest before you get on the tube.
It had been a long and weary drive for the Russian Chevrolet. All 4 Moskoviches had been traveling in convoy where possible, and all had made the ship to Fremantle. There was a £2,000 prize for the leading crew at this stage. For Roger Clark, that was a handy bonus to share with his Swedish co-driver. Once booked into control, cars could not be touched, except to be driven to a steam cleaning ramp the following day. This had to be done to satisfy Australian quarantine regulations. All that day, cars continued to arrive at the control. John Hart was there to meet the girls from the Telegraph.
Well, you're a little late. The tortoise has been a little slow, or what's been the problem?
We had a bit of a brush with the bank, as you can see.
This is this round here on the front guard. What happened there, dear?
Well, we tried to miss an animal, and we hit the side of the road instead. So we got a little truck man to help us cut the thing out, and kept going.
Where's Jenny and Minnie? Where have they gone? Come round. Well, I wonder if we can go through a little bit. You've got your feet on the hot Bombay ground here.
A great individual effort ended that night with the arrival of Max Winkless and John Kieran. Delayed more than a day in Yugoslavia, they'd driven non-stop from Belgrade to catch the field. They were 70th, but they'd made the ship. Roger Clark's car was leading, and emptied of fuel, it was pushed to the wharf, followed by Lampinen's Taunus. In third place was the Citroen of Bianchi. Cars were to be locked deep in the ship's holds during the voyage, and no work could be done on them. Many drivers still had a winning chance. Most did not. But the 72 crews who were to make the 9-day crossing to Western Australia had helped create sporting history. For already, more people had witnessed the London-Sydney Marathon as a live, mobile spectacle than had seen any other sporting event ever held on this earth. And the stage was set for an exciting finish across Australia. Fremantle, Western Australia. The sea voyage was about to resume, and Roger Clark's potent rally machine had a clear 9-point lead with 3,500 miles to go. 71 cars would be chasing it. Lucien Bianchi's Citroen was spurred, one of a host of front-wheel drive cars snapping at the leader's heels. Like many of the other, this was a special works rally car built for one, and those lightweight alloy body panels were not meant for bumping. One of the late starters for the marathon, Bianchi was the international entry of the lot. He was born in Italy, is a naturalized Belgian, car is French, and it was entered in England. And Bianchi is good. Already this year, he'd driven a Formula One Grand Prix racing car for Cooper and won the Le Mans 24-hour sports car race. To win the marathon in the same year would be a remarkable achievement. The 20 leaders at Perth with 10 different models of cars represented. For the Australian sections, competitors were to leave in the order in which they'd lost points, which put Clark in front. And if the roads were dusty, he'd take some catching. There'll be a lot of pressure on Clark and his Swedish co-driver Anderson, for the Australian sections will be more difficult, faster and rougher, and the top men will be trying hard, very hard. State Premier Brand flagged them away, with other competitors following at 3-minute intervals. Second away was Stapolari and Lampinen. They were 9 points behind Clark in their German Taunus. Only 1 point further back was the Citroën. Bianchi waited patiently while co-driver Ogier attended to the bookwork. Rano Aaltonen followed teammate Paddy Hopkirk, and then came Andrew Cowan, roof well laden for the long overland crossing. Perth gave Harry Firth a special farewell befitting the leading Australian. The best placed Holden was the Ferguson Chivers car, equal 11th and well fancied for a fast run on their home territory. All leading cars made the marble lock control on time, but no one was taking the next stage lightly. Ahead lay one of the marathon's really tough sections, 123 miles over rough bush tracks to the Lake King crossroads. For all competitors, it was foot down from the word go. The Australian 1800 hit the first kangaroo. Funny, because the man who spread all the roo stories was Gelignite Jack. The Jackson and Chambers Lotus Cortina was only a single point further back. Endurance runs are their specialty, but Ken Chambers can manage a sprint when the need is there. Not a masked bandit, but Dave Johnson ready for the dust. The Monaro had Barry Ferguson at the wheel. Other Australians doing well were Lister and Walensky in the Volvo. Clark and Anderson must have relished the clear road, for they made the so-called impossible section to Lake King with a couple of minutes to spare. Also on time was Lampinen's Taunus, but following him, Bianchi only just made it, for by now the dust was becoming a problem. The section was a disaster for Paddy Hopkirk. Blinded by dust, he crashed into rocks, flattening 2 tires and damaging the steering. He lost 14 minutes, points that were to cost him dearly. The dust also worried Rano Aaltonen, and the former Monte Carlo rally winner dropped 7. The required average was no less than 62 miles an hour. Andrew Cowan was really pushing his Hunter through this rough, running 5 minutes late and complaining of being slowed by the dust. But visibility was to become worse. Green's 1800 travelled blind for the last 20 miles, but gained 3 minutes on both Cowan and Firth to be fastest Australian car. Doug Whiteford got the Monaro cracking and lost only 4 points for one of the day's best efforts. Less happy was former motorcycle champion Jack Forrest, who had just been hit by a car, his own. He slipped while guiding it as it reversed out of the crowd and got a nasty crack in the middle. While early cars were setting off for the east, others were still weaving through the scrub toward Lake King. Latecomers were prepared to believe the stories they'd heard about rough outback tracks. Some didn't make it to the control, and the field was thinning. Ahead was the longest section in the country, more than 800 miles across the Nullarbor. Most crews chose to service at the gold mining town of Norseman. With an average speed of better than a mile a minute to be sustained, not many could afford the luxury of a long stop, and the tyre men were busy. The leading private entrant at this stage was the Innes Island Mike Taylor and Andrew Hedges Mercedes-Benz. A brave effort was to end on the Nullarbor when their fan went through the radiator.
Well, the first Holdens into Norseman, Barry Ferguson and David Johnson. The crowds here, have they been pretty indicative of what you've seen since you left Perth, Barry?
They have, yes. It's been quite surprising. And all along, even out in the middle of nowhere between, where was it? Somewhere in Lake King, I can't even remember the place names. People standing in the middle of nowhere. It's just like Afghanistan.
Yeah. Now, how's the car gone generally? Pretty well, David?
Very well, yes. We're very, very happy with it. It hasn't missed a beat the whole of the trip, even from London. It's percolated along as a Holden should.
What do you see, Barry, as the toughest section from here on?
Well, the toughest section from here on, I think, will be the two in the Flinders Ranges. The toughest section of the whole event so far was the run down to Lake King. That'll go without doubt. But of the remaining sections, the two in the Flinders Ranges, I think, will be the tough ones.
What about the Nullarbor? Does that present any problems to you?
Oh, I think not really. It'll just be a nice, pleasant Sunday drive.
The first part of the crossing was fast, with good bitumen almost to the South Australian border. But near Eucla, on the Bights, by the ruins of the old telegraph station, the surface was sand, and progress was slower. At the end of the day, Bianchi and Ogier were first into Ceduna. Cruising above the century, they'd averaged an amazing 91 miles per hour for the entire crossing. 91 for 900 miles. The next section was one of the easy ones. Colin Malkin had time to get in, dodge the roll bar, close the door with its plastic window taped in place, and settle back before Andrew Cowan thought about moving on to Corn. Ken Chambers and Eric Jackson were in the first dozen, but they were about to make a team sacrifice. Their car was running well, but Roger Clark's sister vehicle was developing a misfire, and before the next control would burn valves. To keep the leader going, Chambers and Jackson are going to surrender their own twin-cam cylinder head and put themselves out of the marathon. The work exchanging cylinder heads delayed Clark, and though he raced into Corn control, he dropped 14 points and lost the lead. Thus, almost 9,000 miles from London, Simo Lampinen, the boyish Finn in the German Taunus, became the new leader. Bianchi was second, Clark now third. Fourth was another Finn, Aaltonen in the British 1800, while only 1 point behind him was Cowan. An event that had seemed like a procession had suddenly become wide open. Anyone could win. Into the Flinders Ranges, the order was Lampinen, Bianchi, Clark, Aaltonen, Green level with Cowan, then Firth and Hopkirk. Only 15 points separated the lot of them. Faint heart wasn't going to win this event, and Andrew Cowan had now turned up the wick, driving, as he said, at 110%. Lamberton's lead was short-lived. The rocky going had damaged his car's suspension, and he lost time on this section, slipping back to third. Bianchi, Clark, Lamberton, Aaltonen. Green and Murray were sharing 5th place with Cowan, each of them close to the leaders, and had passed Firth, who was being bothered by fuel starvation problems. After a quiet start, young Melbourne driver Ian Vaughan was beginning to work his way through the field. Sharing 11th place at Perth, he was now in the first 10 and about to do a lot better. The poor Porsches. After lugging their massive kangaroo bars across the world, they couldn't find any roos to practice on. Herman from Kenya was now the leading private entrant. Riding closer to the bumps than Sprenzel and Roy Fiddler were still working midget miracles and were obviously enjoying themselves on the loose dirt. But at Bratchner, our worried Lucien Bianchi had a problem to sort out before booking into the control. Third only 4 hours ago, Bianchi was now in the lead, but not without troubles. And when you're the leader, all worries seem greater. With those in front starting to tumble, Paddy Hopkirk realized he was back in the running. Probably the most experienced man in rallying today, Paddy was preparing to play a sort of high-speed waiting game. And that included pressing the leading Citroën to the very limit. No one travels comfortably with a determined Hopkirk behind him. Hopkirk's crew were relying on headphones and two-way radio to pass on pace notes to the driver. This was a long section, more than 200 miles, and the average was a tight 52 miles per hour. This is the green Murray car. The Australian 1800 was now clear of Andrew Cowan's Hunter, which ran off the road in the hills, but was able to continue on without damage. Cowan is one of Britain's top drivers and has twice won the Scottish International Rally. His co-driver, Colin Malkin, was 1968 British Rally champion, and between them, they know how to stir a car along. Firth was firing on all 8 again, but trouble was in store for the leading Australians, Evan Green and Jellic Knight Jack Murray. A wheel bearing had been mistakenly over-tightened at the last service point. The bearing seized and a back wheel fell off. They signaled for help to a passing aircraft, which brought them the part they needed, but the delay cost them more than 4 hours and dropped them nearly 20 places. Car 94, the Merle Citroën, was even less fortunate, retiring soon after with suspension trouble and ruining Citroën's chances of the team's prize. A route check had been established at Curnamona Homestead to make sure competitors took the right road. Bruce Hodgson had time for a drink and some advice from Ford Australia competition manager John Garland. The control was crowded for Curnamona. Some people had travelled 900 miles to see the cars come through. Rough roads were soon to end John Sprinzel's game effort. A stub axle was to break. He had a spare flown into him, but it was for the wrong side, and he ran out of time. Telegraph Monaro team leader David Mackay was always impressive, but suffered wretched luck. Misfortune on the first tight section way back in Turkey had ruined any chance of success. Some people had bad luck where it didn't matter. Not so Mackay. And for his entry, bad luck was soon to make a fresh and unwelcome reappearance.
I was having a little sort of
Yes.
John in the seat at the back there.
Did you have seat belts on all the boys?
Oh, yes, all of us had belts on. And the next thing I knew, I remember saying, "Christ, George, you know, what are you doing?" And poor old George had it all sideways, and I think the big front wheels got sort of ploughed into the soft dust, and she got up on the side, and I couldn't think that it was going to fall over, but it did.
David, George, how is he? Is inside the hospital
George
here?
is in there, and he's surrounded by pretty girls, and I think he's feeling pretty well, actually, you know, because, you know, George, he loves it in there.
Through western New South Wales, worn cars suffered a little more, and in Victoria that night, Roger Clark held second place, but was worried by growling noises in the transmission. But he had a man to catch, and if the car would hold out, he intended to do just that. The man in front, Bianchi, still led at Edi and did a spot of self-service. Everyone was getting anxious, especially Staffalari, who aroused police interest by a rapid entry to the control. It was a good time not to understand English. The big Falcons sizzled through the early morning fog in Victoria. Bruce Hodgson shared fastest time along the snowy river valley to Injabira, 2 minutes quicker than Bianchi, but the Belgian still clung to his lead. Behind him came Lampinen. Front suspension splayed out from the hammering it had received through the night. Third now was Andrew Cowan, driving with great determination. He'd been matching the leader's times all through the night and was just ahead of the equally determined Paddy Hopper. Ian Vaughan had been flying and moved up to fifth, and 2 stars have had bad nights. Clark's stiff has gone, and Aaltonen took a wrong road and dropped from 3rd to 6th. And behind him, Cesaro was proving fastest of all and catching the leaders. Kuma, 300 miles to go, and while Lampinen was in front on the road, Bianchi still led the pack on points. And what of Roger Clark? Differential failure on the final night had cost him 97 points. And the man who led for so long was now out of a place. With the team's prize in the grasp of the Falcon GTs, Bruce Hodgson was still trying very hard. But behind him, Harry Firth was running into strife, being delayed by rear-end problems which would have cost him 52 points and drop him several places. Bad luck, with a little more than 200 miles to go. Tony Fall had lost 5 hours in Persia, but was running rapidly through these final sections, and the British Leyland Works cars now held both 2nd and 3rd places in the teams contest. Some of the roads were a little narrow for the big cars, and Doug Whitefoot had to restrain some of his 250 horses on the way to Hindmarsh Station, final tight section of the marathon. Lampinen, closing the gap on Bianchi, was trying as hard as he knew to make up 4 minutes. But you can try too hard. And even the most brilliant driver can overdo things. The steering has been broken and repair will take a couple of hours. Staffalari and Lampinen, top contenders for so long, are out of the prize money. They call this area the Big Badger, a forestry track high in the mountains northeast of Kuma. In 15 miles, there were 300 bends. Lampinen would issue no more challenges, but Bianchi didn't know it. Besides, there were others after him. Cowan was now 2nd and reveling in the forestry conditions. Just like a Scottish rally, he couldn't afford to ease because Hopkirk was only a handful of points behind. Again, Cesaro was fastest of all. If he'd gone like this through Asia, he must have surely won. With the leaders dropping, Vaughan moved into 4th spot after some great times over the mountains. And Kleint and Klaproth took the Taunus into 8th position. Barry Ferguson in the leading Monaro headed Roger Clark, still going hard, because that's the way he likes to drive. The Elsie Gadd foursome in the Volvo was certain of the ladies' prize and got an escort from the winkless Kieran car. No escort for Rosemary Smith, but she was to finish 2nd among the ladies. Bianchi knew he had Cowan, Hopkirk, Vaughan and Cesaro on his tail. These leading cars were flying. With only 113 miles to go, Bianchi was 11 points clear. In fact, he slept as co-driver Jean-Claude Augier took the car towards the second-last control near Nara. Hopkirk was tailing them. And then it happened. Hopkirk doubled back, seeking help. There'd been a terrible crash down the road. The Citroën and a private car had hit head-on. Lucien Bianchi, 9,950 miles out from London, and the clear leader of the greatest motoring event of modern times, was out at the marathon. His leg was broken, his face cut, his hopes cruelly shattered. And so Andrew Cowan, who only 24 hours before had been sharing 5th place, squeezed into the lead. Cowan had won. This had been a topsy-turvy finish in an event of surprises. Clark, Lampinen and Bianchi, Englishman, Finn and Belgian, all have held the lead at some stage. But at Sydney's Warwick Farm race circuit, it was the quiet Scotsman and his 2 companions, Colin Malkin and Brian Coyle, who took the £10,000 first prize and the Daily Express trophy. The gallant Hopkirk came in 2nd. The 14 minutes lost in Western Australia had cost him the event, for he finished only 6 points behind Cowan. But that's all in the game, and Paddy's been playing it for a long time now. A brilliant finish brought Ian Vaughan into 3rd place to win the Sydney Daily Telegraph Award for the best performance by an Australian crew. It's worth more than $4,000 to Vaughan and teammates Jack Ellis and Bob Forsyth. Only 1 point behind Vaughan was Cesaro. The Pole had been sensational across Australia, working his way from 13th to 4th position. Rano Aaltonen came in 5th, making it a mixed-up finish. A Scotsman, an Irishman, an Australian, a Pole, and a Finn in the first 5 places. Roger Clark and Ove Anderson, who held the lead for nearly 9,000 miles, finished 10th, while their challengers for most of the journey, Lampinen and Stapanari, limped to the line to take 16th place. And of the 98 starters, 56 have made it to Sydney.
You're leading at one stage. Are you disappointed that you've lost the event?
Wouldn't you be?
important is this £10,000, this $20,000 prize to you?
Oh, not at all. You know, it's obviously very important. We all like money, but...